This podcast is part of the Blueberry Network at blueberry.com. That's blueberry with no e's.com.
Right on America is brought to you
by a generous grant from the Built on Dreams Media Network and from listeners like you.
Stand by, please. Rolling on 6. On 6.
This is Adam Scull. Welcome to the premiere episode of Right on America. Bérénice Stevenson de La Salle grew up in Pacific Palisades, California during the decades of the 50s and 60s. She graduated from Westlake School for Girls in 1969 and then studied art at Briarcliff College for Women in New York. In 1971, she moved to Paris where she became a stockbroker for Merrill Lynch. She met her husband Pierre, Pitou to his close friends, within weeks of her arrival. She was 19 at the time and he 46. Dashing, elegant, and extraordinarily witty, Bérénice describes her initial encounter with him as an instant recognition. I knew, she says, that I had come home. Over the next 40 years together, they worked as a team, investing in the stock market and eventually moving to Malibu, California, where they developed real estate together and raised their daughter Devon. Avid skiers, in 1988, they bought a house in Mammoth Lakes. It was here that Bérénice began contributing articles for the local newspaper. Recognizing her passion and talent for writing, Pierre enthusiastically encouraged her to take a stab at a book. She agreed, upon the condition that he would recount to her his extraordinary adventures as a young man in Paris during the fabulous era of the 50s, when he found himself married to the it girl of the decade, supermodel Suzy Parker. Beautiful Riddle was written as slowly Pierre recounted to Bérénice the events of the 10 years he had spent by Suzy's side. It was like pulling teeth, she says. Getting Pitou to open his heart was a painful, if cathartic, experience. Having watched him as he spoke, I feel certain that this is the true story of what happened to them, at least to the extent of Robert Evans's definition of the truth. Bob once said, there are 3 sides to every story: my side, your side, and the truth. And no one is lying. Memories shared serve each one differently. I thought of that as I wrote. Bérénice has also written a book for young children, The Tale of Pumpkin and Piper and the Magic Camera, a bedtime story to help children understand and use the unlimited power of their subconscious minds. While attempting to find a publisher for Beautiful Riddle, the book that was completed shortly before Pierre's death in November of 2011, she additionally is working on the sequels to the Pumpkin and Piper series. Bérénice, just who was Suzy Parker?
She was the most famous fashion model of her time. Between 1950 and 1960, her face appeared on the pages of more magazines than any other woman's in the history of fashion photography. She helped sell more than $140 billion worth of products. That's an estimate that occurred at the time in the periodicals of the 50s. She sold everything from cigarettes and liquor to cosmetics and clothing. She was the first fashion model to break the $100,000 wage ceiling and the first to demand $100 per hour for a shoot. She was the it girl of the 50s, undeniably the first supermodel, which is, as I'm sure you're aware, a title that many who have followed her have attempted unsuccessfully to appropriate. Through this entire period, throughout the entire decade of the 50s, she was married to my husband, Pierre La Salle, who is known to his close friends by the name of Pitou.
Here is a second wife writing about a husband's first wife, but you're coming in and tackling a very poignant area that most people would rather put behind them. So why did you write the book?
I'm so glad you ask that question because I know that it has preoccupied some people, specifically some members of her family, of Suzy's family. First, I wrote the book because of my fascination with the era of the 50s, but much more importantly, I wrote it because of the relationship that Suzy had with her father, George Lofton Parker. It is the subject matter of her life that fascinated my husband the most, and me. There are 3 central characters in the book, 3 women, all of whom are truly beautiful riddles. They are Suzy, Suzy's older sister, Dorian Lee Parker, who was a famous fashion model in her own right during the 40s and the early 50s. And then the third woman is Sandra Littman Howard, who at the time was the Countess of Suffolk and Berkshire. Beautiful Riddle is an exploration of the father relationship in the lives of these 3 fascinating women as scrutinized through the eyes of one man, Pitou, who knew them all intimately. And for anybody wondering, I lost my father the day before my 2nd birthday when he succumbed suddenly to a heart attack. The importance of the paternal figure in a young girl's upbringing has been a preoccupation all of my life. The father, after all, is the first man in a young girl's existence. And in my case, it was keenly felt all of my life. It's no coincidence that as a result of that, I always sought the company of older men. My husband, Pierre, was 27 years older than me. Again, that's not a coincidence. The importance of the father was absolutely instrumental for Suzy and for Dorian and for the Countess of Suffolk and Berkshire. It really determined who they became.
Did you not give any second thought to the age difference?
No, none whatsoever. I fell instantly for my husband. He was the most charming, the most charismatic, cultivated, witty, funny man, and extremely good looking to boot. He had it all for me. He was my mentor. He was my best friend. He was my lover. He was everything. We were together for 40 years, very happy.
That's a testament into itself.
It most certainly is. He died in November of 2011. I was putting the final touches on the book. I really literally just finished the book shortly before his death. It's been a very hard year. It's really my hope that in reading the sample chapters and in listening to this podcast, that it will dispel this jumping to conclusions of, oh, this is the second wife writing the story. What must that mean? There's none of that in this book. This isn't a tell-all book. It isn't a gossipy book. Pierre takes over and recounts the story.
Thank you for joining us for another edition of Right on America.
Located on the internet at www.rightonamerica.us.
Join us again next time for another edition of Right on America. Once in a lifetime, the theme music for Right on America, courtesy Stephen Paul, used by permission, copyright the Built on Dreams Media Network, all rights reserved.